Good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for taking time out of your day to join us here for episode 4 of the Listen, Learn, and Act Initiatives webinar. My name is Denver Parler. I work here in the UAA Communications Department, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. I want to thank our panelists for their time and their thought this morning. For a brief background on today's discussion, everyone on this panel, along with a couple dozen other UAA coaches and staff members, recently participated in a learning and discussion series called A Long Talk About an Uncomfortable Truth, which was led and facilitated by Kyle Williams and Kamal Carter with an educational organization called Decide to Inspire. It was a challenging, enlightening, and ultimately really motivating experience. You know, racism is a problem with a long history in our country, and too often it's seen as a problem for Black people to solve. And it's a problem, frankly, that white people, given our disproportionate power in this country, officially and unofficially, really need to step up and take ownership of. So you're going to be hearing a lot today from white people who are interested in taking ownership and doing our part in the work against racism. So thank you again for your time. Before we get started, I want to take a moment and let our panelists briefly introduce themselves. Like I said, my name is Denver Parler, working communications, and this is my 12th athletic season here at the UAA and 10th with men's basketball. So I'm going to call on them each one by one here to give a brief introduction. Yana?
Hi, everybody. My name is Yana Panelist. I work in marketing here at Florida, and I've been here for a little while in a bunch of different roles. I was a student here too, so I just never left, and they can't get rid of me.
Thanks, Yana. Sam?
Sam Stolte. I'm also in communications, and I'm coming up on year 3 with the Gators.
Thanks, Sam. Becca?
I'm Becca Maynor. I'm the athletic trainer for the tennis and golf teams, and I've been here for about a year and a half. Got here last June.
Thank you. Duke?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Duke Werner. I work with the sports health department. I specifically work with our men's basketball team, and I am starting my 27th season.
Thank you, Duke. Janet?
Hey everyone, my name is Janet Taylor. I am the athletic trainer with the gymnastics team here, and I'm in my 3rd year here at Florida.
Thank you, Janet. Melanie? Oh, Melanie, you're on mute.
Sorry. My name is Melanie Welty. I am with the track and field department, and I am in my 13th season.
Thank you, Melanie. Jeff?
Hi, I'm Jeff Ewan at the Hawkins Center, and I'm in my 3rd year with the UAA.
Thanks, Jeff. Melissa?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Melissa Stecky. I work in the accounting office here at the UAA, and I think this is my 26th academic year at the UAA.
Thank you, Melissa. Doug?
Good morning, everybody. Doug Sutherland. I work in the ticket office here at the University of Florida, and I've had a couple stints here at the UAA. In this role, I've been back for 4.5 years.
Thanks, Doug. Shannon?
Hi, I'm Shannon Wells, Associate Head Volleyball Coach and finishing up my 7th season here.
Thank you, Shannon. Joe?
Greetings and good morning, everyone. I'm Joe Rollerson. I work as Guest Services Coordinator in the Operations Department, and I've been here.
Thanks, Joe. Alicia?
Thanks, Denver. Alicia Longworth, an associate AD here. I oversee Gator Vision, marketing, a few different things. But this is my 11th year here at the UAA.
And Val, would you like to say hello to the group or no? No, Val says no, thank you. All right. I thought that would be the case. All right, well, let's dive in. One of the things that was really unique about the long talk was that it wasn't something that we just showed up to talk. There was a lot of prep work, reading, some talks to watch, so that we were all coming in with a real good or some baseline knowledge. But even in the course of that, there was, I'm sure, a lot of things that we all learned. So I just want to hear from people what your reaction was as you read through and watched some of those preparation materials. skills. Shannon, will you start us off with some thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. And I think this program was number one, super eye-opening. And so a lot of emotions, there was like a motivating feeling. There was definitely a frustration feeling. The frustration coming from how am I, almost 40 years old and just now learning this information and what has taken so long. Motivating in the sense of, I just want to learn more and kind of understand why we are the way that we are right now and the situation that we're in, and how I can be the best that I can be. But I think the best way to put this is I've had numerous conversations. I was an education major, and so a lot of my friends are still in education, and that's the very first place I went, right? Like, you're in school, I have my master's degree, I feel like I'm an educated woman, and here I am certified to teach education, and I'm still learning all of these things going, what? Like, how is this possible? So probably the best conversation I had was actually with a teacher that their school system is 17% white, 17% white. And so I asked, I'm like, what are you teaching? Like, here's some of the things that I'm learning. Are you able to teach this? And he's like, I can't, I can't teach this. Like, we're barely touching all the things in history. And he's like, we don't even touch Vietnam. We don't even touch the Gulf Wars. And these things happened, in the 90s, and we're not able to touch it because it's so much information. And then I talked to a principal of a private school, and she's like, for sure we teach these things. And so, I was a public school kid. I went to public schools my whole life. And I don't know, I was frustrated, but I'm frustrated for teachers who don't have the freedom to teach the things that, we're learning right now. I think it made me even more inspired when I voted this year to make sure I understood the school board and what the school board stood for, not only just in general terms, but what kind of things did they want to do with the curriculum. Like, that became really important to me. So yeah, I guess I left with all kinds of crazy emotions, but overall, I feel awful for teachers who are maybe learning these things and want to continue to teach these things, but they're just not able to due to the curriculum they have to teach, education at heart. So that's all on the government of what they have to teach the test.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Shannon. Appreciate that. Joe, can you give us some thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of echo a little bit of what Shannon said also. You read the material, you watch the videos beforehand, and you're a little shocked and taken back. You're going like, I know this is real, but I've never heard of a lot of this. And then afterwards you start wondering why, how did we ever get, our history shows that we learn shows that, we keep learning and repeating things of the past. And you start looking like, why did we ever get as a society in this horrible rut and, wrong? And it seems like it just continues on. And part of the process is us acknowledging our shared history. And I like that part about our beforehand. Looking into our shared history and diving in deeper now that we have more information. Where can we take it from there? It's just like Shannon said, it's not stopping after we read it or watched videos. It's now, what can I do now? You're reaching out to friends that you've had for years, asking questions that really you wouldn't have asked previously, one reason or another. And again, I think that's why, the heading was, it's kind of perfect, the uncomfortable truth. Uncomfortable parts that we're now looking at and we're now sharing and discussing with each other, evolving hopefully.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah. The title, Uncomfortable Truth, is very, very, or long talk about an uncomfortable truth, is very, very apt title. Becca, can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so like Shannon said, the educational piece was just crazy because there's so much I think our education system is just so tailored to paint this perfect picture of our country. And, oh, racism ended with Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. We fixed it. And that's just not the case. And there's so much that's hidden and things that are in our backyard. Like we had to do this long article, read an article and watch a video about the Rosewood Massacre. I had never heard about any of that. And that happened right here. And it's just crazy the things that are just pushed aside to make us look like a more perfect union. And then I think the people that led the long talk, Kyle and Kamal, they were amazing. And they just forced us in the best way to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. We had lots of uncomfortable talks, role play situations with calling out racism. That was awesome and so helpful, but super uncomfortable to do until you practice it and you get used to it. And just the experience we had both with the pre-work, the work in between the session, and then during the sessions was awesome, eye-opening. And I think we were all really eager to get back on Zoom and talk about everything each week.
Absolutely. Thanks, Becca. Melanie, can you talk to us a little bit as well about the reading and preparation process?
Yeah, when I started watching that first video we watched on the history of racism, it's an hour and a half and you're like, oh, this is going to be like informational, and you kind of get into it. And then you realize how hard it is to watch. And, I started watching it and I had to stop it and walk away and start watching it again, just watching all of that and knowing, about Tulsa and Rosewood and a bit, but watching that no matter, like, as the country grew and we were supposed to, get better and racism was supposed to kind of go away, that it never has. And everything is founded so much on racism that we know that, but then when we're watching it, it's really, really hard because you just realize that it's just not ever going to go away unless we decide to make something and do something about it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Melanie. I want to transition. Some of you have kind of touched on this already, but what are some of the things that stand out to you most, whether it's an idea, a quote, a historical event that you maybe learned about or learned more about, an experience you had going through the long talk? I just want to hear, what the highlight was or what stands out most to each of you. Duke, will you start us off on this?
Yep, thanks, Denver. Just to start off with, I feel a lot like the previous people who had just talked. I feel bad for myself for my ignorance going into this, of not knowing a lot of this stuff that we talked about. I talked a lot about in our meetings about my love for history and my love for the classes I took in college. I took a lot of electives in college in history. I actually took electives in grad school in history. And when we were listening to this information and talking about it, I hadn't heard any of it. And it was kind of, excuse my language, it pissed me off at first. There was some anger there that I spent a lot of money trying to get a good education and learning about our country, and they didn't teach me that. And there was a lot of truths and facts that are out there that are never discussed or never talked about or never taught. So my biggest thing on this, and I wanted to read this, and let me find it. Let's see. The thing that blows me away is systemic racism, and I'm not going to lie, I didn't even know what that was until this past summer. Talking to some people on our staff, talking to some of our coaches, I started diving into that, and it's crazy to me of what's going on. But let me just read this and then I'll move forward. But systemic racism goes beyond individual beliefs and feelings about people of other races. It means that the systems on which a society functions, the economic system, the education system, the healthcare system, the criminal justice system, etc., are both infused with and impacted by the racism within which they were created and maintained. So after knowing that, and then learning what we learned about Reconstruction, how Reconstruction was working, there were thousands of African Americans that were in local government, state government, even in our Congress. Reconstruction was actually going good, and there were things that was working from that. And all of a sudden, I think with a lack of better way of saying it, I think white America shut it down because I think it was going too good. And if you look at Tulsa and you look at East St. Louis, you look at some of the things that happened there, Rosewood, which is 30 miles from our house that, you know, I've mentioned on there, I drive by every time I go fishing at Cedar Key, had no idea what I see the Rosewood sign, had no idea what that meant. There are things that have happened that are pretty crazy and ridiculous. And then you look through the governmental things of the GI Bill, redlining. You know, I've always thought, and this again, this is my ignorance. I always thought everyone was equal and had the same opportunity. Well, it's not even close to being true. Everyone does not have the same opportunity for advancement in our country because of systems that have been put in place throughout our history. So,
yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. Becca, what stood out to you?
So we had to, as part of the coursework, watch a lecture from Robin DiAngelo, the author of White Fragility. And she said a quote that it takes years of sustained study, struggle, and focus to even start to dive into all of this. So that just struck a chord with me because we can't just tune in when it's socially gaining traction, when this movement is socially gaining traction. We can't just post the black square on Blackout Tuesday. We can't just get done with our long talk Zoom sessions and be like, oh, well, I get it now, we're good. We have to continue to make a constant effort to educate ourselves, incorporate it into our daily lives, not just when we have the time and feel like it. We need to encourage conversations with each other, with people that don't quite get it yet. Call out racism when we see it, not just brush by and ignore it and know that, oh, well, I'm not racist, so that's not my problem. It needs to be just a constant effort that we work into our daily lives to continue on this journey to learn more, educate each other, educate ourselves, and it just can't stop here.
Absolutely. Thanks, Becca. Jeff, what stood out to you?
Thanks, Denver. Yeah, and Becca, just to piggyback on what you were saying there for a second, it does go back to, it's been going on for a long time. We're all tired with this pandemic and everything, and it doesn't mean we don't stop wearing our mask, we don't keep social distancing, we keep plugging along. Well, racism has been going on for 400 years. And imagine how tired Black people are for 400 years. Every day they face this. And yet, as a white person, as a white male, we have to continue to have the stamina, kind of like what Becca was saying. But Denver, to answer your question, the thing that really stood out to me, and Becca touched on it earlier, was it wasn't just about reading articles and watching videos and having discussions. It was about skill development. And they brought up a skill development on how to engage with people when you feel like someone has said something that's a racist comment. And they kind of called it the 3 I's and everything, and doing some probing questions, by first just asking for information on what do you mean when you say, and kind of flipping what the person said and turn it into a question and everything. And if the person engages with you, then to kind of take it a step further, look for insight and say, okay, well, how do you think that makes Black people feel when you say that? Again, just the probing questions, and if the person doesn't engage with you and shuts down at that point, doesn't show empathy and everything, then okay, well, okay, I'm not making any ground there and stuff. This might not be the right time. That person might not be in a place to do this just yet, but you're trying to plant a seed, but if you do get some more feedback and empathy, you can take it that step further and just kind of talk about the impact. Well, what do you think the impact has on Black people when you don't support them in this, whether it's Black Lives Matter and so forth and everything. And that was the biggest thing to me, was just giving you some tools for your toolbox on how to continue to approach this.
Thanks, Jeff. And I think, Janet, you're going to piggyback on what Jeff had to say. So let's go to Janet.
Yeah, I was just going to say that was just definitely one of the most practical things that we learned in doing this 3-week course is, how do we engage with people? What do we need to do? And in role playing this ourselves, we realized what we want to do is, throw out facts. We want to throw out but this is happening, but this has happened, but this is our history, but this is what happened here and there. And that just makes people more defensive. And so like Jeff was saying, you have to ask the questions. You have to be like, oh, well, what did you mean when you said this? Well, what was your thinking behind that? Where did that thought come from? How do you think it would make somebody else feel if they heard you say that right now? So in reality, like, you're having to give them the space to be able to process what they are thinking, so that they know and that they can see how this impacts a Black person, how this impacts somebody that's not white, how this impacts, you know, somebody that grew up totally different than how we grew up. And, you know, everyone's experiences are their experiences, and you can't be shamed by your experiences. You can't feel bad for your experiences, but you can take your experiences and continue to learn and continue to grow, and be open to hearing what other people are saying. But the biggest thing I thought from that was just that we have to ask the questions. We can't push facts, because facts just turn people defensively. And one book that I've read recently is called Nonviolent Communication. I can't remember the author right now. I should have looked that up. But their whole process of communicating is a lot like this, where you listen and observe in what people are saying and hearing, and then you're trying to figure out the feelings behind it. And in doing that, you're trying to hear what needs are from that person, and then what they're requesting. And so it's very, very similar to this 3I approach of information, insight, and impact. And so, yeah, that was definitely very practical and very applicable to how to move forward from this.
Thanks, Janet. Yeah, you make a great point that, you know, if you're constantly barraging people with facts, as we see so often on social media, it generally causes people to just become more entrenched rather than making them feel heard, because we all want to feel heard. Joe, what stood out to you?
All right, I'll try the new system, so hopefully my audio will sound just a little better. I hope. Really, for me, it was the entire historical process, and you know, it started when we first started this country to the progression all the way to the 70s. Several things stood out to me, but one that has just baffled me, and I've talked to several other department members or staff members also about the Tuskegee study. And if anyone hasn't looked it up, just type in on a search engine Tuskegee study and look and see what that is about. But in a nutshell, you know, it was a study that began in the 30s, roughly around 600 Black men with syphilis, and the study continued to 1972 when a news article came out. And you know, looking more into it and and that's what I you know, you get the topics and then you dive in deeper to find out even more information about them. So you know, the study was going on for since the 30s to the 70s, but while it was going on, you know, penicillin was invented and given to the masses, and I mean that was ignored by the entire study, and they went on until the congressional investigation in the early 70s. But that threw me for a loop, and I who knew that, and I didn't know that there was a, you know, historical segment or area in the CDC building that reflects on this study. So I mean, I've talked with others, you know, how many times have we drove through towns and not thinking about government buildings or historical museums and going in just to see. I would have never thought that would have ever happened. But I mean, there's so many things, so many wrongs in our history that's just one little blip on the map that really stuck out. And then, you know, the redlining was new also. I mean, you know that, you know, housing discrimination existed. You just didn't know to what extent. And when you look in and, you know, the evolution of the FHA and the VA loan process early on, and how that evolved and how that affected families, Black families, and uplifted, you know, white families in really neighborhoods that are across the street from each other, was very educational and informing for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. Sam?
Yeah, I think just kind of mine was a lot of what Duke and Joe have shared about the historical tie-ins and how it shaped our history and things that we just don't know, and maybe the reasons why we don't know them or why we are today. I think a quote really stood out to me from James Baldwin that was in one of the supplements, but it reads, "Not everything faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced." And to me, like, that's what all this comes down to, is like, we don't have a great history or actual working history of our country. We have what we were taught as kids, and we take that as you go, and that's our perspective. But there's this whole other part of our country, you know, that might not look like us, that's going through something completely different. And so we have to face these things, and a lot of that is just through education. And so I think like this whole workshop was amazing for that. I mean, Melanie mentioned it, but one of the videos, it was an hour and a half long, and it was like, I mean, I'm sure it could have been much longer, but it was incredible information that you just don't have. And it's like totally makes you feel a different way about certain things. You're like, yeah, maybe this is why we have systemic racism in our country, that there's so much inequality because of these historical events that shaped it. I mean, our whole country's history is riddled with it. So it was just really powerful from that perspective. But I really think that quote put it into perspective. And I think it's just trying to understand these things and empathize, and having a little bit more stamina, and realizing that, you know, there are other people out there that have an experience completely different to ours, and just understanding that historically helps you really connect with those kinds of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sam. It's hard to overstate the value of honesty with ourselves, which can be very very difficult, and with each other. Yana, how about you?
Thanks, Denver. Yeah, I think a lot of people talked about the history and how eye-opening that was, but I think for me too, it was the approach to history and how we're understanding it. You know, having to take some of that responsibility on ourselves to dive in and do that research and understand. But then also, you know, in the pre-work, a couple of people mentioned the Jeffrey Robinson lecture, that the really long one that started it, and he had a quote in there where he says, like, who controls the present is who controls the past. We have to understand that knowing if we want to better understand history, we can go straight to history and look at that. And what really kind of opened my eyes to that was he had put up some pictures of advertisements at the time. And obviously my marketing mind goes straight to like that kind of stuff. But, you know, that's really a raw and accurate lens. You know, it's like a time capsule at that point to be able to look at, you know, the words that people used and the way things were framed and depicted and pictured. And that was like really eye-opening and enlightening to me, to be able to, you know, saying you need to better understand history can be really daunting because there is so much to unpack there. But that kind of gave some direction and some narrowed focus to say like, okay, this is where I'm going to dive in, and this is how I can make sure I'm getting like a really raw understanding of what was happening at that point in history.
Yeah, thank you, Yana. Really good stuff. So there was a lot in there, wasn't there? So going through an experience like this, I mean, frankly, can be transformative. So I'm curious to know, how do you view yourself or the world differently now versus before going through this series, this experience? Melissa, can we start with you?
Sure. Thanks, Denver. And I think it's a great segue question, actually, to much of what was just said. And so for all of us, this changed our perspective, I think. And it's personal, actually, and very emotional, and it's heavy, and there's a lot to unpack. And so Yana kind of touched on this, but when you start to think about how you may read something or look at something, you have to look at it with a different lens to really understand how someone else might feel. And the examples and sort of the factual things that occurred all through history that we may have read about even or just touched on, and yet did not associate with racism. And the reality is it was racist in its nature, and it continues today. And I think a lot of us put it, I shouldn't say a lot, I found that I often put it on other people, you know, maybe their politics or how they view things, and I'm not like that. And the realization that, yes, I am, because you touched on this and Duke did there as well, where it's systematic in its nature, and we've been party to that. And as a white person, we are party to that. And the expectation can't be for Black people to fix this. And prior to this, I don't think I realized, but I was expecting Black people to fix it and to tell me what to do or how to think. And yet now when I look at, there's documentaries and YouTube videos and podcasts, so books, whatever your style might be to learn, we all have a job to individually educate ourselves to have a better understanding of what racism really is. And it's your perspective. Again, I thought I'm cool with it. I'm good. I'm not racist. And I think it was really hard. It was heavy and hard. And it doesn't stop after that 3 weeks. So really the work is now. And each day trying to stay connected, continue to educate myself and think about in things that are said or actions taken. And I'll just use this as a quick example. I took my kids, they were little, to visit Philadelphia, and you go to the Liberty Bell and you go see the Declaration of Independence. And I'm so proud of that, and specifically in the Declaration of Independence, there was language that made Black people less than the white people. What? I'm not factually connecting to that as we're visiting this historical site, and I'm relaying to my children how important this is. And through this process, there's a museum in Montgomery, Alabama. I wouldn't say I intentionally wouldn't go visit. I just didn't know it was there, and I didn't think about it. And it's the Museum Memorial of Peace and Justice, and 4,400 Black people who were abused, murdered, lynched from 1877 to 1950. That was like yesterday for people. That is hard stuff. But thinking about, okay, those are the museums maybe we need to be thinking about visiting and making sure our children know about. So.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. Doug, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, Denver. For me, echoing some of what Melissa said and what a lot of people have said, but it was very personal. It was very, eye-opening for me because I came out disappointed in myself. I felt very ignorant, lack of knowledge about all of this in terms of our history was just tough for me. But I'm a self-motivated person. That was good in a good way that for me, because then I can now push myself to learn more, to do more, to be better. I've always had the perspective of, I'm not a racist. I don't engage in racist activity or behaviors or anything like that. I'm doing good things. When in all reality, I'm not doing anything. I'm sitting back and I'm doing nothing. I'm not speaking up. And a lot of the information that came out, one of the things we talked about was being a good ally, being an ally for Black people, for standing up for them. One of the great statements that was made was, white people to the front. And that's really, truly the case. It's getting these people that, I might not be able to go and change a racist's mind. I give it my best shot, but they're going to be entrenched in where they are and what they're doing. But there are a lot of other white people out there like me that think that they're doing the right thing by not doing anything, by not being a racist person, by not engaging in that type of behavior and just sitting back and letting it happen. When really we need all of these people to step up and do something and make that change and focus on those good people to get them to do something, to stand up for Black lives and to stand up for what's going on and make those changes in that group of people. So for me, it definitely brought a different perspective, and how I approach things on a daily basis now is different. And it's good for me in that way, because now I feel like, I can be uncomfortable, and that's okay, but I can step up and actually do something as opposed to just sitting by.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug, so much for sharing that experience. Alicia, how about you?
So Denver, what I was going to say is pretty much very similar to Doug. The word courage was used. Every one of us that look like me, that look like you, that look like Doug, like everybody on this call, we have to have the courage to stand up, to learn, to call out racism, to call out injustices. Where I think for a long time, much like everybody, what they've said is, I'm not a super outspoken person. I don't love, standing up and calling attention, but in this instance, it is so very important to do it. And it is so very important for all of us that look like me and look like you to do that, because this has been happening for 400 years. And we've said this, like, how tired are our Black friends, our Black coworkers, our Black families that we know for carrying this burden for so long and not having white allies to stand next to them and to call it out and to have the courage to do so. I mean, far too often people don't say something because they are not sure what to say. We need to learn, we need to educate ourselves so that we do know what to say and we do know how to address these things. And this was so eye-opening from, start to finish. So the courage to be able to stand up and speak.
Awesome. Thank you, Alicia. Yana, how about you?
Yeah, I think to kind of echo what Doug and Alicia said, it's the I think most humbling part of it for me was thinking about the mental and emotional exhaustion, especially watching those videos and reading the articles. And, we said a couple of times that there were times where we had to pause it and step away and come back. And it was really eye-opening to me to then, I think Kamal drew the connection of but that right there is privilege, right? That I can press pause and go take a mental break and come back to it. And that was super eye-opening to me, because it's something that then it becomes our role to be mindful of that and be mindful of, how our privilege is affecting all of the areas of our lives and what we can do about it, what we can control, and then doing that, having the action to follow that. But being mindful to also not let it fall to the wayside when we get busy or when we get tired, and doing the hard work we have to do, and maintaining that, not just doing it when it's convenient for us. And I thought back to, I read Beloved by Toni Morrison in high school. It was one of our required reading books, and I remember that book shook me. And I remember saying I got to the end and I'm crying because I can feel the emotion in a way that I never understood from a history book. And I've read the book probably 3 or 4 more times since then, but every time I finish it, I can put it back on the bookshelf and walk away. And realizing that that's not enough. So now Beloved is on my fireplace. So I see it every day, and doing little things like that to keep that top of mind and continue to, drive that self-motivation to keep learning, it starts with little things like that, because then maybe that gives me enough confidence to later that afternoon speak up in a conversation when I hear something that's not in line with what I know to be my principles. And I now have the confidence to have some action tied to that. Everything is, like Doug said, not doing enough or not doing anything, it's not enough. We have to do something. And that goes into also, they talked about the difference between just not being racist and being an anti-racist. There's a big difference there. And I had no idea that there was a difference until we got into this. So the work it takes, the emotional and mental stamina it takes to be an anti-racist, that to me was the biggest way I've had to change in how I view myself, my role, and my role in the world, and what I've taken from this whole experience.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yana. Janet, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, just piggybacking on what Yana was talking about, just with being anti-racist versus not racist. Like, I think that was a big revelation to me because, you know, a lot of what, you know, Doug talked about, you think, oh, I'm not racist, you know, I've got Black friends, you know, this and that. And in reality, I was part of the problem. I am part of the problem. Like, I didn't realize how much me just living the world in a, you know, everyday life that I am promoting this white privilege because, you know, I can walk into a store and nobody thinks twice about me, you know, coming into a store with a hoodie on. But in reality, like, there's just so much realization through this that as a white person, we have to be so intentional with it. You know, it's like Duke was saying, it's so ingrained in our system that there's so many people out there that just don't realize that. You don't realize how ingrained it is. And if us waking up every morning and just going through life without being intentional one way or the other, we're continuing to promote this system. And so I think that was one of the things that really stood out to me and just impacted me the most, is that we have to be intentional. And the lady that Becca talked about that wrote White Fragility, she spoke, and in her one of her talks that we listened to, she talked about she was given a talk and this woman had a question, and I don't remember exactly what the woman said, but it very much was in terms of a microaggression against Black people in the talk as well, and the woman didn't even realize what she said. And so the speaker, the woman that wrote that book, had a choice to make. She said, do I address, she in her mind, she's thinking, do I address this now and lose, you know, half the room that agrees with this woman? Or do I not address this and lose half the room that this comment was directed towards? And she had a choice to make, and she chose to lovingly and respectfully address the comment, which made the woman uncomfortable, but it showed that she was standing up for what she was speaking about. And I think that that's one thing moving forward that we as white people really have to do. Like, we have a choice to make. Every single day we have a choice to make. You know, Doug talked about pushing to the front and being the front, and they that comes from, so in some of these protests that have happened, Black people would be at the front and the police would say, get back and push at the same time. Whereas when the white people were at the front, so they would say, white people get to the front, and the police would say, get back really loud and then push. I mean, there's a difference with white people being at the front. And so we have to translate that to our everyday life. What does that look like every day? In terms of white people getting to the front, and you know, like a lot of other people said, we have to be intentional with what we're doing. You know, and intention comes with action. We can't just sit at our desk every day. We can't just, you know, come to work and go through the motions every day. Like, it has to be a choice, and it has to be intentional. And that's the only way that a difference is going to be made, is making the choice to take action. And that is being anti-racist right there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Janet. And let me see if I can just synthesize a couple thoughts here that, you know, a few of you touched on, like the you know, just the general ignorance, you know, of understanding how these things operate. And, you know, that's not something that is being said to shame people or to blame, you know, each individual white person for being white. That's not the intention at all. But rather to understand that, you know, for us in our society, whiteness, being white, is seen as the default or the neutral, or it's completely non-racial. And it's very similar to a fish in water, and understanding that, you know, how aware is a fish of water that they're swimming in? And that's kind of how whiteness operates in our society. And so it's not, you know, these comments about the ignorance are not being directed as attacks toward white people or incrimination of individual white people and how they operate, but just, you know, the broader scope of whiteness. And so I want to circle back to, you know, I think Doug mentioned, you know, the white people to the front was one of the lines or the themes, I guess, of one of the sessions. So what role do you all see white people needing to play in the fight against racial injustice? Jeff, can we start with you?
Sure. Thanks. Thanks, Denver. You know, that's where they talk about the white people to the front. And I'll share more of a personal experience with me during this discussions that we were having. And when that part got done and when they went over white people to the front and how it came about, as Janet described, one of our participants in there just kind of spoke up and made the statement, you know, when it comes to this point, when you're in your day-to-day life and you see this happening, are you going to step to the front? Are you going to do it? And I remember distinctly at that moment, the first thing that popped in my mind, I immediately thought about my family. And I thought about my responsibility. I said, well, I got to be there for my family. And by the time that thought ended, it hit me. I was like, well, no, wait a minute. That's exactly what has been going on, is by staying on the sidelines. And, you know, I think it was Coach Holloway that said it earlier this summer in one of our episodes about, you know, silence is acceptance. And that's exactly what you're doing. And then by the end of that thought, I said, you know what? Because I love my family, I need to go to the front. I need to be the one that participates in that, because I thought I need to make sure that my children are going to grow up in a world that's better than what it is right now. And because of that love, not to protect myself for them, but more to help provide a better world for them to grow up in and hopefully end this. And so that was a personal experience for me on how to make sure to step up.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Jeff. Melanie, how about you? What's your view on this?
Yeah, I think as we talk through it and kind of back to the white privilege thing is what that I've kind of come to realize is that all white people have white privilege. And it's not a negative or a positive. And I think when people say like you have white privilege, white people often see it as a negative, and it's not a negative. It's just where we came from and our backgrounds. But we all have to accept that we do have that white privilege and then decide to move forward from there, but not say, well, I don't have white privilege. But because we are white in the United States, we all do have it. We just have to really accept the fact that we do have it. And then the other thing that I really look at is, you know, we talked at one point in this discussion of how as a society, and we have to decide at some point that equality is what we are moving forward to in our country. And at one point, you know, the main issue was, you know, gay rights, and we, you know, now we're trying to get more equal towards gay rights, and then it was women's rights. And as we move towards those, we've always fought really hard towards those, but we've never as a country fought towards equality for Black and brown people and white people. As we have, if we do that, we can actually make some changes.
Thank you, Melanie. Yeah. Sam, how about you?
Yeah, I thought what Janet said would pretty much put mine into perspective is just, you know, being intentional and being anti-racist, and then going off what Jeff said, kind of getting off the sidelines, figuratively, like we need to be more impactful and initiative as white people in this. Like, I think a lot of the systemic stuff has benefited our kind, obviously, over the years. So it's like kind of this like complicity and just kind of like lack of, you know, needing to do anything. So we haven't. But I think if we really want to change things, it has to come from us. We have to come to the front. I agree. And then just on the educational component and sharing information with other people like us, I think we need, the white fragility is huge, obviously, because we need to be able to have the conversations and not immediately feel like we're being attacked. Like we that shouldn't be the first reaction. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of where all this comes from with this like racial stamina thing, is like you've got to be able to like be aware of what's happening, and it's not a personal attack on you. Like you may be have great relationships with people of color, but that doesn't mean that you're an anti-racist. You know what I mean? And that's what we all need to be if we really want to like move the needle figuratively. So
yeah, thank you, Sam. Shannon, how about you?
So I kind of took the role of a white person in just a general sense of like, how can I connect with this? Like, what experiences have I had? And so as a woman, I think being a woman, you can relate to this really well. And so the reality is, Denver, until people that look like you, a white male, decide that people that look like me as a woman deserve a voice and deserve a seat at the table, nothing changed. Right. And so now, like, just like Melanie said, we were fighting for gay rights and women's rights. Like, there were people, there's a hierarchy of people. And until that perceived hierarchy decided like this is right, nothing was changing. And so I look at it from now it's our turn as white people to have a voice and decide that it's time for Black and brown people to have a voice and to have equal opportunity and to give them a seat at the table. And we have to provide those opportunities for them. And so that's, almost empowering right now. It's like exciting. I see, 50 people in our class that kind of have that same mentality that we get to take into our small community of Gainesville and really start making a difference.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. Duke, how about you?
Yeah, Denver, I just wanted to share real quick. We keep talking about what we can do to help. We have taken it upon ourselves in our department since July, into the June and July, of having these conversations within our staff. And we have groups of 4, and the magical technology of Zoom has made that really easy to do. But you heard what Janet said, you heard what Becca said, you've heard some things I've said. The honesty of it all is when we had our first meeting, we were all looking at each other like, what the hell, or what are we doing? What are we doing? Everybody was scared to talk. Everybody had no understanding. But we have developed the vulnerability within our staff to learn from each other and to move forward with this. So I do challenge people in the UAA, and I challenge other departments, that it's something you guys should look at. I think your sports should look at that with your coaching staffs. I think our department should do this. I'm just telling you through experience, it started out rough. It started out, what are we going to say? It started out a lack of understanding. Every time we meet and every time we do something, it gets better. And I feel like if we can do that throughout the UAA, we have a strong voice obviously in our community, in our state, but with the brand that we have through our whole country, we can make a change. But it does have to start, in my opinion, within our groups and our departments.
Absolutely. Thanks, Duke. Appreciate that. I know we're coming up on an hour here. We're just going to get through one final question for you all. So, I know Jeff kind of touched on this already, but how have you all carried this information or these changes back to your friends or your family? And how has that been for you? Melissa, can we start with you?
Sure. Thanks, Denver. And actually, this really touches on what Duke was just saying, because I think your coworkers, or your definition even of friends and family and who's around you and an opportunity. And so a simple answer too is there is just so much information out there. In other words, in the form of, as we were going through this anti-racism training, there's a number of documentaries, YouTube videos we talked about, and podcasts. And so taking the opportunity when you can, maybe it's something mentioned to you and you say, hey, I'll use this as an example. July 4th, hey, it's a big holiday and we're all going to celebrate. Well, for Black people, they were not free on July 4th in 1776. So it's an opportunity. There's a number of different documentaries and structure around that. Hey, recommend read this, listen to this, be open to this. So you can have that dialogue. And then how Jeff touched on this real quickly too, I find myself even every single day, there's maybe a comment that's unintentional, or that I'm having a conversation with my children, or they're viewing someone a certain way, and just making sure that I give them some perspective, some feedback in that moment is helpful.
Thank you, Melissa. Joe, how about for you?
Much like Melissa and Duke said, I'll start off with the UAA family. I think this has allowed us to, or not allowed us, but now we're starting to ask questions, or what are your thoughts? What are your feelings on this? Whether it's our Listen, Learn, Act initiative, something going on in the world, we're having those conversations. And for me, if it weren't for the pandemic, I would be visiting many more people in the UAA. Just so those of you I know from marketing, communications, admin that I drop in and just start having a chat with. but those open communications. And then it goes, I've had conversations with my mother also. I mean, now it's just asking, because my mom has spoke about it before, segregated water fountains before, or segregated restrooms, which, she mentioned it before, but now it's going back and going like, well, what did that mean? What was your feeling then of that? She was, younger then also, but I mean, it's her perspective of that. And then, it's to brothers and other family members also, just going, again, we have more information now, a little more background, so you can start those conversations and dive into them a little deeper. Because again, I think, for me, part of it is at least starting the conversation and then evolving from there. And then where do we go next? How do we better ourselves? How do we better our family members? My 2 college age kids, it's, having those discussions, which again, from my mother born in the mid 30s to, my kids born in the late 90s, there's a different perspective of when they were raised and how they were raised. And, it's continually having conversations and bringing awareness with all that we've discussed on here. It's been really helpful.
Thanks, Joe. Yana, how about you?
I think, a big thing that I've been able to carry to my daily life from this, like I mentioned earlier, starting with small reminders for myself, to not let it go to the wayside, to be able to keep it top of mind and keep pushing myself to learn more. And then that makes the moments when we're called to step up a little easier, because it's top of mind and you've got that, base of knowledge and understanding that you're confident to step in that moment, and that becomes your more initial reaction rather than something you have to pause, think about, and then jump in. For me, I think that the framework they gave us in having those conversations was really helpful, because I'm always been very nervous about jumping into something that maybe I don't have all the answers and I don't know what's right, so I'm not gonna say anything. Where they framed it as you don't have to say anything, you're asking questions. So that takes a lot of the nervousness or like being scared of arguing facts. That was their whole point, right? Like, you're not here to argue facts, because the moment you start arguing facts with somebody, it becomes a debate. And the moment you start spewing facts back and forth, you're going to get stuck in that, and it's not going to be a true conversation. So being able to approach it with like, why, walk me through your thought process. Why are you thinking that? How do you think that would make someone feel? That removes a lot of those barriers to jumping into the conversation, that nervousness of being in it. So, I think that has been something that has made that process so much easier, and also makes it non-confrontational either in that way, right? Like, we're just trying to talk, and it's an uncomfortable talk, but we got to have it. And that makes an uncomfortable talk it helps open other people's mind to it as well. Like, our minds are open to it, but then we can help. It's like a fire spreading, right? Like, it can help catch to someone else. And starting small, it really does have big impacts. So
Thanks, Yana. Appreciate that. And that brings us to the end of our hour here together. I want to thank again all of the panelists today on this discussion. I want to thank everybody who took the time to watch. Thank you to Kyle and Kamal, who led the long talk, and to Linda Teeler for helping create this opportunity for us here. I know we've touched on a lot of different topics, a lot of different resources and videos and whatnot have been mentioned. If there's any of those that you want to get in touch with, or even other resources, please feel free to reach out to me. We have a fantastic resource library and shout out to Spencer Thomas, who's been extremely helpful with that. But we have all kinds of resources, very passionate about helping people, connect people with education. So feel free to reach out to me anytime. on this topic, and I'll be glad to have those conversations with folks. Thank you so much to you all. Hope you have a great day and a great weekend. Bye-bye.